Hello.
Hello.
So Michelle, how's the hurricane by your house?
We were fine.
Yeah.
Got lucky. We just had a lot of rain for a few days. But it's really sad that so many people passed away.
Yeah.
It was like 120 plus. Shall we start? I have an item and then Brian has an item, and if anybody else has an item, feel free to add it to the agenda. We don't have a note taker. Does anybody want to be a note taker today? Well, thank you so much, Kenzie. I can moderate. All right. Today is Monday, September 30th, and this is the SPIN project meeting. It is 5 p.m. Eastern. All right. We are going to talk about SPIN 3.0 mainly today. And I wanted to kick it off with a discussion around timelines, since we've talked about that quite a bit, or we've asked about that quite a bit in the last few meetings. I want to propose that we cut an RC by mid-October. We don't have to make a decision about this, but right now we could go through the issues and then kind of have a better idea. But I just wanted to seed mid-October as a good place to cut an RC, so that we can have, all the subsequent things that need to be done and testing and ample time for documentation and things like that, if it's not already done before KubeCon. Hate doing conference-driven development, but that's where we are right now. So, and also one other thing to take into consideration is that we already have several breaking changes in Maine, and it would be really nice to cut something sooner rather than later. So that's also an additional point. Does anybody have any current opposition to that? And we can, again, come back to this at the end of the call as well to get a feel. But any current thoughts?
Awesome. I think that's good to set a goalpost with a little bit of buffer ahead of KubeCon, and we can always do a thumbs up, thumbs down as we get closer to see how we're feeling about it.
Okay, sounds good. All right, I'm going to hand it off to Brian. He's volunteered to help us with triaging, so go for it, Brian.
Sounds good. I can share. Cool. I'll just share the board that we could talk through. Oops. Okay, there we go. Okay, yeah, it's just going top down through these in the new column. Deprecate execution of uncomponentizable WAGI modules. This sounds, well, actually, no, there's some things that Michelle and I just figured out that we need to take into account, and Ivan and Lan have since commented that I haven't seen yet. But there's some templates we need to deprecate, and also turn the deprecation warning to an error when we detect WAGI apps. I'm sure there's I don't know if we would want to remove the manifest changes from the spin manifest for Waggy Executor. Go ahead, Ivan.
And just to be clear, we're not deprecating Waggy apps. We're not doing that. We are deprecating uncomponentizable
Oh.
applications.
Good distinction. Yeah.
So if you look at the top of that issue, there's a list of 3 criteria, and those are and criteria, not all criteria.
Okay. Yeah, fair enough. So is it, well, with that in mind, is there anything more to do here than if we are already warning about I mean, do we still error out on the to actually deprecate the uncomponentizable Waggy apps? Like I think the heuristic lined it to detect uncomponentizable Waggy apps in factors. It's still a warning. If we detect one of those apps as part of the app, do we have to actually update that to an error?
Well, we need land for that. He can answer that. My impression would be that factors made it an error because the whole point of this, the uncomponentizable modules were going to be extremely painful to do in factors. We weren't going to do them, so we deprecated them in 2.8 and left this as an open issue so that people who went, my module has been deprecated, would have something they could find. But check that with LAN.
Okay.
Oh, hang on. What's that message just whizzed past? The one from LAN. So that seems to be implying that he has made it an error, but it's not explicit. If you click on that link that he gives, then maybe it will show us.
Fun. Let me get rid of this.
Okay, no, that's not clear, but I think it's an error, but check with him.
Yeah. Yeah, it just might be the case that this is still not an error, but yeah. Yeah, okay, I'll follow up with LAN. All right, so we'll put on that issue for now. Come back to track. Okay, well, this is I call to action. Michelle dropped it into Discord, but we should try to distill down the set of documentation changes that represent breaking semantic changes for 3.0. I know there's a few for factors that may not be tracked here in terms of the embedding API, like the component loader API has since changed to support component dependencies. It seems like it will change again to support target environments when that lands. So just call to action to update anything that we think about here.
Can I just jump in real quick here? I think the goal we want to set around triaging is we want folks to be able to like pick up stuff off the board and work on it. I think that the previous issue that we just touched on, though it needs a little bit of clarification, I feel like we could move that to the must-have column, and I think it's in a place where whoever picks that up can kind of complete the rest of the investigation. Is that anybody opposed? No, sounds good.
So one caution with that issue is that is being deliberately left open for a bit to allow people to make it findable for people who are running into the deprecation error. So it may be something we don't want to kind of resolve in the normal sense for a little bit. Does that make sense?
It does. I wonder if it makes sense to move it from an issue to like full-fledged documentation rather than leaving the issue open. Yeah, okay, cool. So we could add that as a action item for this issue before it gets closed. I'll update.
Okay, so I think we should, along that train of thought, we should probably move the track and agree upon documenting breaking semantic changes to must have as well. LAN out of band for this next one. Modules with duplicate imports cannot be componentized. Said he's fine with punting this, especially because Grain, being the perpetrator here, has there is a workaround, and it's just adding a flag to the -- release flag to the Grain compilation invocation. So just leave that and maybe the nice to have. I have spoken to Karthik out of band about this 3.0 documentation toggle, which is the little drop down in the developer docs. And he made it sound like that's pretty straightforward to update. There's a question about dropping 1.0. And there's also the bigger question about who's going to tackle the migration or the actual porting of documentation to 3.0. I am tackling the dependencies. I think Lan is doing the factors, maybe Lan and Ryan. But they're still porting the 2.0 stuff over and then removing whatever's not necessary. Seems like
user facing.
Huh?
Is factors user facing?
There's embedding APIs in the advanced sections of the developer docs that reference using
Okay, yes. I bet they've not been touched since 1.0. Okay. No, cool. Thank you. Yeah, you're right.
So must have. Review RDMS type. I think this is yours, Ivan. Do you think this is a must have for 3.0?
It's I mean, it's not a must have, but 3.0 is our last chance to, well, I don't know. 3.0 may be our last chance to do it for a while. We don't seem to have a good handle yet on how we evolve wits. I'm guessing we will have new wits for 3.0, which gives us the chance to add new things to them. I don't know how hard it will be to add new things after 3.0. But I think it's definitely, I think it needs to be a nice to have rather than must have. No one is going to block 3.0 based on that.
Okay, so maybe nice to have. I mean, yeah, I see how it's intrinsically tied to the last conversation to be had here, which we might need a bigger audience to have. I'd be fine moving it to nice to have until we have more clarity on that. Mismatch between the spin wit and the effective spin worlds. I mean, do you want to talk a little bit about this? I know this came out of the targets work.
No, I mean, I've worked around in target worlds. Yeah, I mean, it's just, our wit files are not correct, and that's just how it is.
Not blocking 3.0, same line of thinking as the last.
That's certainly not blocking 3.0, no.
And investigate wit interfaces version upgrades. I just generally don't think that we've had the bandwidth to put the thought required into this discussion. And I do not think we will get to this for 3.0 personally. If anybody else has objections, I think this would be a nice to have.
Don't you think this is a must have? I mean, we're presumably, are we not going to be issuing new wits for 3.0?
I don't know. Oh yeah, I guess if WASI config and WASI key value are landing, then, and if we also tackle party must types too, then yeah.
I think that we should keep this in the new column because I think it needs a little more definition. I struggled. I read through the RDBMS stuff with Brian, and we talked about like WIT interfaces and upgrades and versioning quite a bit, and I'm just having a really hard time scoping out this issue, which I think everybody is having kind of the same issue. But it would be nice to kind of think about this from two different perspectives. I was reading over the old notes and thinking through the conversations we had in previous meetings, but it seems like there might be two ways to think through this, and one might be, so one way to think about this is potentially from the kind of a runtime perspective. So if you have a version, excuse me, if you have a minor version update to an interface, does that get, and you basically have your application target that upgraded interface import, how does the runtime resolve that, and does it resolve it appropriately? And then the other side is from a developer experience perspective, like, are there any like errors, or I guess I need to think through kind of how to even explain this problem, but what is the experience currently when you're trying to reference, when an application is trying to use an updated interface? And are there any errors that we need to expose, or any developer experience related concerns? And so that's my best stab at like trying to talk through kind of like the two issues at hand, I think here. But does anybody have something to add, or a different way of looking at it? Because I want us to be able to kind of get to an issue that we can really scope and resolve.
I don't have a different way of looking at it, but from the sort of something to add point of view, this is the stuff piling up behind this issue. WASI key value is stuck. WASI observe is stuck. WASI config will be stuck. RDBMS types will be stuck. If we can't solve this, we are paralyzed on Spin 2.0 forever. So that, you know, there is stuff now piling up behind it.
Part of me thinks that tackling the RDBMS stuff for 3.0 might be like a good, like, top nice to have, because if we tackle that, we're gonna have to think through, it'll be like a good way to think through these kind of version upgrades. Do you agree, Ivan? Because you have kind of like the most, or some of the most experience. Yeah, Kate as well, because Kate, you've been working on the factor stuff.
I might be missing something, but I guess my assumption was we would say this is Spin 3.0 and this is our new set of WIT. This is the new set that we support. And when you build Spin 3.0 apps, they target those worlds. And if you try to run those apps, it needs to be a version of Spin that supports those worlds. And it's just a very distinct cut. Like, I think for the Spin Cloud plugin, we'd need to add a lot of catches there potentially for things that Fermyon Cloud won't support. I do think this is rough for Fermyon Cloud's experience, but to Ivan's point, I think we just have to break Fermyon Cloud support and just basically say these are all the new worlds.
Do we have to break Fermyon Cloud support? Or could Fermyon Cloud pick this up in the Spin 3 timeframe? Yeah, could it pick up the updated WITs?
Potentially. Yeah, I guess in my head I was thinking the priority is updating Spin even if it breaks Fermyon Cloud, based on what we'd heard about the importance of Fermyon Cloud support. Like, Spin is priority to Fermyon Cloud, but we could maybe update everything in time too. So yeah.
So that makes sense to me. I think the conversation that we were having before, I'll try to reframe, which is like, we need to, I think Lan brought this up, we need to convince ourselves that updating a WIT doesn't require a breaking change, excuse me, updating a WIT does not require a major version change of Spin, so that we can continue iterating on WITs without having to bump a major version.
just as a comment, I think that should be the case in the future, but I think right now, if we're completely changing an interface, like, for example, variables to WASI config, I think that's a major change. But if we were adding things now that we would be on WASI config and everything there should be forward moving and backwards compatible, then it wouldn't be a major change from there on.
Okay, yeah, and the difference here is that the interface that's changing is like a major version change versus with something like RDBMS types, so that's a minor change technically, I think. Go ahead, Ivan.
I would not expect us to be removing anything in 3.0. Kate has mentioned WASI config. I would really expect that to sit alongside existing spin variable, preparatory to deprecating spin variables over in favor of WASI config. There's no reason to just variable brought out from underneath people. I think we can do this additively at first. There'll be new interfaces, there'll be new bits in existing interfaces. But I don't feel we have a burning need to remove anything. The trouble is that, as we saw with MQTT, adding new things without changing the interface version or the world version or whatever is problematic. It onto, you know, you've got a mismatch then between the SDK and the version of Spin that people are running.
Ivan, you cut out for me a little bit, but I think I got most of what you were saying. I don't know if anybody else had that issue. So is the consensus here that we don't want to tackle versioning and interfaces at the moment for 3.0?
What do you mean by we don't want to tackle versioning interface? And we have to, don't we? Or
What is the scenario that I mean, I guess like I'm trying to understand what the action item is around versioning for 3.0.
okay, maybe it's not for 3.0, but like I say, we've got a whole bunch of stuff that's piled up behind this issue. And yeah, I mean, if what you're saying is we can kick this further down the road by issuing a whole bunch of new WITs and building everything we know of into those WITs, and then solving the actual kind of how do we evolve those WITs issue. But even then, we'll still have the fact that WIT 3.0 and WIT 2.0 exist alongside each other.
Yeah.
Which is exactly, which is the same thing we'll have presumably as WIT 3.1 and WIT 3.0. So it feels like it's kind of the same issue that we have to solve for minor version changes. I don't know, maybe I'm missing something.
I think it'd be helpful to add the issues for what all of this, what the issues that kind of we talked about around config and key value to this issue, and try to work on adding some context here.
We can do that. I'm not just looking at that, and Lan is specifically asking how do we handle adding well, does he mean IE or EG? Oh God, I'm pedanting. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, that's probably a good plan.
As far as I understand this is not specific to Spin. This is an issue with upstream tooling as well. Generally, that the handling backward compatible WIT changes there's not a great story yet. There's the since and deprecated gates that are being used for WASI HTTP. But I don't think that the implementation of that is very flexible at the moment. I think Alex is currently tackling that. And I think there is a precedent for us just punting this until the tooling or until the ecosystem really converges on a solution to this. The precedent being that we would just fork all of the wits and then add a new versioned world for that we would expose in Spin, and then Spin would support both old versions of the worlds and new versions of the world, which is it's terrible, but the burden at least of the complexity falls on us instead of developers. So maybe nice to have. Yeah. All right, cool. And 3.0 is done. Congrats, everybody. I'll stop sharing. Anything else? Any last thoughts or closing arguments?
I think I'll just circle back to is, mid-October a good cut for 3.0, and it actually sounds like it is. It could be earlier because mainly what we have is some documentation to do, and we also have some fleshing out of that first issue around around Waggy modules. But yeah, any thoughts on that, on the date?
A possible risk with earlier would be if people perceive it as sitting in RC for a long time. RC feels like it should be the final approach, but I mean, we could certainly cut a beta or an alpha earlier. Or we could, if we could manage the communications, we can cut the RC earlier. Yeah.
Is there a precedent for cutting an RC before documentation lens? Like if we cut an RC0, is it a poor form to not have all of the documentation reflected? Or is the documentation toggle independent of an RC release until we cut the final RC? Or
That's a good point, actually. RC feels like it could have some docs associated with it, whereas alpha or beta, I'd have lower expectations. But yeah,
okay,
I guess RC, the clue is in the name. It should be. It's our first guess at what's ready to go.
I don't have a strong opinion on alpha, beta, and RC, to be honest. We've just been doing RCs and we haven't done the alpha, beta. I'd be fine with trying it out. I think we're really close to cutting a final release though. Like I wouldn't be opposed to cutting, if everything's ready, like the week after an RC, like I wouldn't be opposed. I don't think we need to wait till KubeCon or anything like that. I think it'd be fine to get it out a little earlier for a shocking change. But yeah, that's one thing. And in terms of documentation, I think we have cut RCs before the documentation was ready. It'd be nice to get everything all in one go this time if we can. And I think we should shoot to have all of the must-haves completed, including documentations by the RC.
I am certain that we issued the Spin 2 RCs before documentation was complete, because documentation was complete like the night of the release. Something ridiculous like that.
yeah, it's fine. I feel like some of the documentation can be delivered piecemeal, like the more in-depth tutorial sort of things can come in a later RC, but the reference documentation is pretty easy to land ahead of time, at least for dependencies. It's I can PR what's already done for that. Does that make sense?
Can we take out that CLI reference for spin 3 in the documentation? Please.
Yeah, that seems like a pain to keep maintaining, to keep generating CLI
And-
doc.
And I find it, I mean, I don't know, maybe Kenzie or Karthik has metrics, but I find it hard to believe that anyone uses it. But I am ready to be surprised.
Sorry, I was so deep in the notes. You mean reference documentation for spin
I mean,
CLI?
specifically the CLI reference, that basically printing out of all of the help text.
I can take a look to see what numbers we have on that.
Right, thank you.
Cut the bloat. Okay, on that note, anything else? Okay, actually, let me just kind of wrap up the next steps here. So the stuff that's on the board that's not in the new column is ready to be worked on. If you want to do something or you want, something to work on, these are great issues to work on. So let's pick them up and let's get them done. And then if you think of something new, please add it to the new column. I will mark this as the day that, we've decided what's in 3.0, but it's fine, like if you have something trickle in, like don't be afraid and we'll just do the same thing next week with anything that shows up. And I think that's it. Okay. And anybody have? Go ahead.
Yeah, I have one last thing that I glossed over when I was talking about doing the triage. Removing one V1 support from the docs. Does anybody have strong opinions on that?
I don't have, I mean, it's low maintenance. Oh, Kate, sorry.
I might be echoing what you were gonna say, Ivan. I was just gonna say, it doesn't seem necessary because you're just removing things. So I would say don't prioritize that because that's more work. But that's just my thoughts.
I agree. Good point. Yeah.
The one piece of work associated with it is that bloody link checker. The fact that when somebody moves a page, when Sigstore naming names, when they move one of their pages, the links in V1 break as well, but that's trivial.
That sounds good. I'll reply, or I'll ask Karthik if he had any strong motivation for wanting to drop V1. Follow up from there.
All righty. Any last thoughts, parting words? Excited faces? Another major release, you guys and gals and people. All right, talk to y'all later. Bye.